All right, so this morning I want to talk about a technical topic, the topic of subcooling and what it is. So we just happen to have this little trainer here, which is nice. It's this guy right here. Yeah, okay, so this is our evaporator. Wait, I'm confused. I'm very confused. Oh, no, this is our condenser. All right, I'm a little confused about how this one is piped, but regardless. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about subcooling. So first off, how do we measure subcooling? Everybody's feeling talkative this morning. I appreciate that. Britton, how do we measure subcooling?
Sorry. Excuse me.
You're excused.
Sorry, a little out of it right now. Pressure-wise on the liquid line with the temperature
Yes, so you compare the pressure
and saturation.
on the liquid line, and then you convert that to what? What do you have to do in order to convert your pressure to saturation on the liquid line?
Reference a table.
You have to reference a table, right? And in most cases, that table nowadays is within our digital manifold. You just set the refrigerant, and it automatically gives you your liquid line saturation temperature, right? Or condensing temperature. That's what I prefer to call it. I prefer to call it condensing temperature because that's really what it is. It's the temperature at which the refrigerant is. We're going to do this as a group just to make sure that you're all alive. Your condensing temperature is the temperature at which the refrigerant is condensing. Okay, let's try this again. Condensing temperature is the temperature at which the refrigerant is condensing. Thank you.
Condensing.
Condensing, great. Nothing like a morning meeting. So when we're looking at our saturated liquid temperature, our saturated condensing temperature, our condensing temperature, what we're looking at is the temperature at which the refrigerant is condensing inside the condenser. So if I could pick a tube in the center of the condenser, this is our condenser here. If I could pick a tube in the center of the condenser and I could attach a thermometer to that tube in the center of the condenser, I should see the very same temperature that I see when I measure my liquid line pressure and convert it to a condensing temperature or a saturation temperature. Right? So I'm taking a pressure, I'm converting it to a temperature, but that represents a real life thing. And this is what I always want to get through to text when we talk about saturation temperature, is that it's not just some ambiguous number that's meaningless. It actually means something. When we're doing it on the suction side, that's our evaporator temperature. It is the temperature at which the refrigerant is evaporating in the evaporator. And when I'm looking at condensing temperature or liquid saturation, it's the temperature at which it's condensing. Right, exactly. And why does that matter to us? It matters because it gives us a reference point about several different things. It gives us a reference point about how well the refrigerant is being compressed. It gives us a reference point, especially with that when compared to our outdoor temperature. That's what we call approach method, right? It also gives us, that's not approach method, that's CTOA. Approach method is liquid line temperature. Sorry, I have to back up there. So our condensing temperature compared to our outdoor temperature is what we call condensing temperature over ambient, or CTOA is what we typically call it. And then if we just compare our liquid line temperature to outdoor temperature, that's what we call approach. But all of those are giving us some reference for how this system is doing in terms of both compression, mass flow rate, how much refrigerant is moving through the system, and charge. So it tells us a lot. Subcool tells us a lot because it's a compound measurement. So, starting with what Britton said, we figure out what our liquid line saturation temperature is. That tells us our condensing temperature. Now we compare that to what our actual liquid line temperature is. All right, so condensing temperature minus our actual liquid line temperature equals subcooling, right? How much temperature did it drop? So in a single pass condenser, which this is not, but if it was a single pass condenser where you had your discharge gas going in, it would go in at the top and it would travel through until it became fully liquid at the bottom. Okay? So you create a liquid seal at the bottom of your condenser. You need to. because our systems don't have receivers in them. You know, the bulk of the equipment we work on in air conditioning doesn't have a receiver in it. So the liquid is stored in the liquid line and in the bottom of the condenser. That acts as basically our liquid storage tank for the system when it's running. You guys following me so far? So if I don't have enough refrigerant in the system, what happens? Eventually, I lose that liquid seal. Has anybody ever seen a sight glass in a liquid line where you can actually look and see in and you see the bubbles in the sight glass? The bubbles in the sight glass are an indication that we don't have a liquid seal down at the bottom because you still have vapor and liquid mixed. Another name for that is zero subcooling. Another name for that is still at saturation, meaning it has not fully condensed. It is not 100% condensed. It doesn't mean it hasn't been condensing, because it has, because it's mostly liquid still. I mean, it's very rare that you're going to find a sight glass that's mostly vapor. It's still mostly liquid, but it hasn't fully changed to have a complete liquid seal in the bottom of this condenser. Okay? So, if we're measuring a lower subcool than what our target is, let's back up. First off, where do you find on the equipment that you install, we'll talk to installers here, equipment you install, Jordan, you look like you're prying your eyes open, so I'm going to talk to you. And the equipment that you install, where do you find your target subcool?
At the condenser.
At the condenser. The condenser data tag. It just says it right there. It just makes it so easy. And even easier than that, it's almost always around 10. For most of the equipment we work on, other than microchannel condensers, it's so close to 10 as to you can pretty much just guess it's 10 in most cases. And okay, it may be 8, it may be 14. I'm not telling you not to follow what the data tag says, but I'm just saying that it's always close to 10. So if we have less than that number, so say the target is 10, but we're measuring the differential between our condensing temperature and our actual liquid line temperature is only 3. What do we do? What do we do?
Check coils.
Check coils? Okay.
Check head pressure.
What if it's a brand new system?
Check the refrigerant to make sure it's charged right.
Yeah, so you would probably, so if you did a new piece of equipment, most people, they're going to charge to subcool, right? So what you do is you start jacking refrigerant in it until you get more subcool.
You do it slowly so you can see it.
You don't jack it in, right? You do it slowly. That's right.
And you use a scale.
And you use a scale. And you do it only after what?
You realize the line set's over 100 feet?
You do it only, well, the line set is abnormally long, correct? And then you're weighing it in based on your estimated length of line set and all that sort of thing. These are all the right answers.
Or it can change the correct form.
Right, you're giving a lot of good answers here. It's run a while, you're weighing it in, you're doing that based on estimated line set length because all of them have information on how to do that within the installation instructions. So you're RTFMing.
I mean, really? I just go yeet and open it up.
You just yeet it in there? No, you yeet it in there, right? Right, because yeeting is, yeah, right. Yeah, just yeet that refrigerant in there.
The good stuff in the manual about piping lengths, so you just have to do it till you hit subcool. It doesn't say, hey, add this much refrigerant, not in carrier.
Sure.
Unless it's a carrier ductless system.
The ductless
The
system.
carrier ductless
Ductless
system
is
tell
different.
you.
Yeah.
So I think, so you bring up a good point. It's possible. It's been a while. So I will RTFM, and we will add it into the specific carrier chart. It may not be in the installation manual. It may be in the product data. Or it may be in the actual carrier long line guideline, because there's a separate guideline specifically for long line applications. So we'll look at that, and I'll get that out to you, so you've got that. Because, and in fact, that's actually universal. The amount of refrigerant it takes to fill a certain diameter of line, this isn't like a manufacturer-specific thing. And people expect me to know these things off the top of my head. I actually had somebody who's a very well-known industry trainer for a very large manufacturer ask me, so what number do you use? Do you use da-da-da-da or do you use d-d-d-d-d? And I'm like, I don't remember numbers. I look it up every time. I don't remember my own phone number, basically. And I used that exact voice. And then he hung up on me and said, I'm never watching your videos again. And I said, that's fine.
Wait, he said that after you hung up on you?
Yeah, he did. He texted me. He sent me a Snapchat. He snapped and then he chatted. Yeah, huh?
It's under product data.
It's under product data, okay.
You charge for 15 feet and then it tells you a whole formula to put in.
Yep. a whole laundry list. And that is actually, so I'm going to add that to the app. That's a good one to add to the app. Put in your line size, and then, I'll add that to the app. Okay. Huh? Yeah, you'll get all the commissions. Oh, that's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good times. Good times. Okay, so yes, the point is that we charge by Subcool, and we do that because that's a good thing to do. It's what the manufacturers tell you to do. But you got to do all this other stuff first, right? And Matt made some good points. You're going to a piece of equipment that isn't brand new. You need to go through all the other stuff first. Now, the thing with Subcool, though, is that those other factors actually don't change it as much as you would think. Subcool is a fairly stable number in comparison with other numbers. Superheat can move all around, especially with a fixed orifice. But Subcool is pretty fixed. Even if you have low indoor airflow, your Subcool is going to be pretty close, generally speaking. It's not going to change a lot. So Subcool it's a nice number because of that. It's a fairly trustworthy guide to follow. But here's where I kind of want to peg this, is imagine to yourself when you have a higher Subcool number that you're filling that condenser coil with more liquid, right? You're stacking more liquid in the condenser coil. Now what happens as you stack more and more liquid in that condenser coil? What happens to the effective space that condensing can occur? It becomes smaller, right? So, because when you have a liquid column, liquid doesn't compress. I mean, it does compress, but so little that it doesn't matter. So you've got this really solid column of liquid that's filling up your condenser. So the more you pack liquid in here, the smaller the area. And this is why you'll notice, you'll hit a point as you start charging a system that head pressure will start going up pretty darn quick. Now, when you're dealing with ductless systems, you're going to hit a safety state where now it actually starts limiting its compression, and so that tricks you because your head pressure doesn't just keep going up. So that was, we've run into that before, which is again why you have to use scales and you have to weigh it in and all that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, that's good, that's good. Hey, education costs you one way or another. That's what we always say. I don't know who we is, and I don't think we always say it, but as you stack more liquid in that condenser, you reduce the amount of condensing area, and that drives your head pressure up because now the area that's available for heat rejection is decreased because we have a limit to how cold that liquid can get, right? There is a limit. There's a stopping point. That liquid can only get so cold in the condenser. And what is that stopping point? No, it's not freezing. What is your condenser rejecting its heat to? Outdoor air, right? So can your condenser by itself, can it get the liquid colder than the outdoor air? The answer is no. So in order for your subcool to keep going up, and we've seen this, you can get 20, 25, 30 degrees of subcool, right? Well, how do you get that? Because as you add more charge, once you get to near outdoor air temperature, once you kind of hit that number can't drop anymore. So it doesn't keep cooling in order to get more subcool. What happens? Your condensing temperature is rising because there's two pieces to that pie, right? Your liquid, in order to get more subcooling, your liquid line temperature can get cooler, or your head pressure and condensing temperature can get higher because it's a differential number. That makes sense? So once we get to the point that we've stacked enough liquid in here, because the reason why we have subcool is to ensure that we have good liquid quality when it enters that metering device inside. We want to have liquid in the condenser, great. But we want to also make sure that we have enough liquid that it can go through the pressure drop and any increase in temperature, any lift on that liquid line so that when it makes it to the metering device on the inside, whether it's a piston, TXV, electronic expansion valve, doesn't matter, that we have solid column of liquid there. So that's why we have to have more subcool. But getting more subcool by driving up our condensing temperature, does that do us any good? No. And the point being, once our liquid temperature approaches the outdoor temperature, there's no sense in adding more. Any more you add, regardless of what your subcool number is at that point, is only going to drive up your head pressure and your condensing temperature, which increases your compression ratio. We've talked about it, makes your compressor work harder and in turn doesn't move as much refrigerant. So you reduce the efficiency when you do that. And this is where that term approach comes in. It's not a measurement you guys take a lot. If you've used MeasureQuick, you'll see it on there. But approach is just comparing your liquid line temperature to your outdoor temperature. That's all it is. Now, approach is tricky because it's on a curve. You can hit approach 2 different ways, and that's why we don't just charge to approach. I'm not telling you to just charge to approach. But once you know you have subcooling, so you know subcooling exists, whether it's 5 or 10 degrees, whatever, 15 degrees, if you look at your approach, getting your approach number lower than 4, meaning getting your liquid line closer to the outdoor temperature than 4 degrees, becomes a pointless exercise. Because in order to do that, all you're doing is just jacking up your head pressure for no reason. I'm going to say that again because I think that's probably, like, I made a couple quantum leaps there, but what we're doing is we're stacking liquid in the condenser. We know that to a point we can stack liquid in the condenser and it doesn't really affect our condensing temperature because we have enough volume. But when we get to a point that we start stacking more in, you start to see your head pressure go up. That's not what we want. We don't want to artificially drive up our head pressure in order to get additional subcool, because all that does is increase compression ratio. A lot of people talk about, and you'll even read it in books, you can get additional efficiency by getting additional subcool. Yes, so long as you're not increasing your compression ratio. Because if you're doing that, then you're hurting it on the other side of the equation. What we're really trying to do is have the lowest temperature solid column of liquid at that metering device that we can possibly get. That's our goal, so long as we're not driving up our head pressure. That's the balance we're trying to reach. Now, people will say that about subcooling because there's such a thing as a mechanical subcooler, where you actually intentionally cool the liquid lower by using additional cooling capacity. So they'll actually use heat exchangers in refrigeration, where they'll use a whole separate coil basically and cool the liquid colder in order to get more capacity out of that liquid when it goes out into a grocery store, for example. And that does lead to additional efficiency of the evaporator coils. But in what we have, we don't have receivers. We don't have mechanical subcoolers. What we got is a condenser. And we've got to do both of these things well, meaning give ourselves plenty of room for condensing so we're not driving up our head pressure, and have a good solid liquid seal at the bottom. And the combination of knowing our outdoor temperature, so this drives diagnosticians crazy when a new guy calls you, man, this head pressure seems high, what's your outdoor temperature? Well, it's been a while since I checked it. Or I think it's probably about 85. It's like, give us a good, correct temperature measured in the shade where it's not affected by the coil temperature or the sunlight or anything like that, so that we have something to compare to, because we need that. Then we need your subcooling, and then we also want your liquid temperature, because we're going to compare the liquid temperature to the outdoor temperature. And again, the outdoor temperature is the bottom number that liquid can possibly get to. So if your liquid temperature, if your outdoor temperature is 85 and your liquid temperature is 89, that means they're already within 4 degrees of each other. You have 4 degrees of approach. And if you tell me that at that point you've got 10 degrees of subcool, that condenser is doing what it's supposed to do. Any addition that you add to that is just going to drive up our head pressure, which is going to decrease the amount of work that piece of equipment can do. Now again, when I throw around rules of thumb, you take them with a grain of salt, and when in comparison with manufacturer specifications, Jessica's really good at looking at manufacturer specifications. So if you want to see somebody who's really good at looking at the panel and seeing what the manufacturer says, she's really good at that, and that is a really important trait. And it's also good to then take that and compare that to some good general rules of thumb knowledge to help with diagnostics. Because it's not all about just charging, kind of like to what Matt and Aaron both said. It's not all just charging. You start with solid visual inspection, looking at your coils, just making sure that everything's clean and in good shape before you even begin with adding charge, especially to an older unit. Does that make sense, though? Do you understand what subcooling is? It's telling us whether we've got liquid. And the bigger that number is, the more liquid we're stacking in the condenser. Any questions?
An interesting thing, I think, is if you look on the inside of the cover for the panel, it actually shows different subcool based on ambient temperature on carrier systems now.
Okay.
Which is interesting for me because as we're trying to fill up that condenser,
Right.
the temperature that we're doing it changes on the outside consistently. So our subcool's not always going to be 10. So say we set it to 10
Right.
on startup, based on the temperature, that number is going to change. So I think it's interesting to kind of look at how it correlates with outdoor air temperature and indoor air temperature.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be because I have seen this, that depending on the type of coil design, that number doesn't change a lot under the normal operating conditions. But if it's a microchannel, then it changes a lot more because microchannel has a much smaller internal volume. Have you seen that it's highly variable in the charts you're looking at?
Most times it's anywhere from 6 to 12.
Okay, and that sounds about right.
It's not huge.
So again, follow the manufacturer guidelines. We are seeing more and more of that where it's not just a single fixed number. But also do recognize, to Jesse's point, if somebody sets it under different load conditions to one number and you show up and it's 2 degrees different than that, don't do the old thing that one of the guys I used to ride with used to do all the time. He said, oh man, this guy's an idiot, he didn't charge his system right. And that was back when we were charging by superheat. And I mean, superheats are all over the place depending on load conditions. And he'd be like, oh, this guy didn't charge this unit right. And it's just like, no, it's a moving target to some degree. And that's why it's kind of important to have that in mind, even when you think about this. So, 6 degrees of subcool, you might be stacking this much liquid. 14 degrees of subcool, you might be stacking that much liquid. Either way, you're stacking liquid, and either way, so long as you end up with a solid column of liquid that's as low a temperature as you can get it without sacrificing your condensing area inside, then you're good to go. Cool. All right, great. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to be notified when new videos come out. HVAC School is far more than a YouTube channel. You can find out more by going to hvacrschool.com, which is our website and hub for all of our content, including tech tips, videos, podcasts, and so much more. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app of your choosing. You can also join our Facebook group if you want to weigh in on the conversation yourself. Thanks again for watching.